10 weirdest items the Pawn Stars ever received. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the SCREENY. After decades in the business, the Pawn Stars have seen it all. But some of the items that go through their store are still too hard to handle. Customers sometimes show up with the most bizarre and wacky stuff no one would want anywhere near them, expecting thousands of bucks in return. Let's take a look at the 10 weirdest items the Pawn Stars ever received. But before we reveal some of the freakiest moments in the history of this show, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos. Number 10. Sean Price's Potato. A lot of people walk into the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop with items that are completely worthless. But Sean Price outdone them all. He made Pawn Stars history when he tried to sell a potato for $100,000. It was one of the most hilarious moments to ever take place on this show, and a funny meta reference to all the customers who hope they'll be able to get a fortune for artifacts with no value. Just like most of these customers, Sean Price had a made-up story about the rich history of this item. He claims the potato was hurled at Martin Luther King during riots in the 1960s, before being found by Sean's uncle who passed it on to him after dying. He asked for an enormous sum of cash, claiming the potato had sentimental value, but Chum Lee wasn't having it. They eventually settled for the estimated value of French fries in Sin City, which is around $2. Wait, he actually bought it? No way! Number 9. Slash's driver's license. When your pawn shop works 24/7, the weirdest people end up strolling through its doors in the middle of the night with even weirder items. One of those items just happened to be a driver's license that once belonged to Slash from Guns N' Roses. To make things even stranger, the guy who owned it wanted to get $50,000 in return, but once Chum Lee and Olivia Black heard his asking price, they weren't comfortable enough to continue the negotiation. Chum called in the big boss in hope his love for rock and roll would come in handy. Rick Harrison wasn't happy to join them at such a late hour, but he found the whole thing amusing. The guy even claimed he used it once as a fake ID after a friend who worked at the bar got the license from Slash himself. Despite his love for Guns N' Roses, Rick wasn't ready to offer more than $1,000 for the item, so the seller walked out and probably went back to bed. Number 8. Saddam Hussein's fingerprints.
Normally, I don't buy memorabilia that has something to do with really bad people. But this represents a major victory for U.S. Armed Forces, and that's pretty cool.
Rick Harrison usually avoids buying memorabilia that has something to do with really bad people. But when an ex-FBI agent walked into his store trying to sell fingertips taken at the time of Saddam Hussein's capture, he was on the fence. Despite belonging to one of the most corrupt and brutal dictators to ever live, these fingertips were taken during a very important historical moment. The seller had one of 44 certified copies of Hussein's fingertips because he was one of the agents present during his arrest. Rick didn't know how to put a price on something so creepy and didn't even know who to call. Harrison offered the seller $1,500, but he wanted much more. He believed that it could easily sell at auction for $10,000 and wasn't ready to let it go easily because it had sentimental value as well. Rick understood his point of view, but didn't want to offer more because no one in their right mind would spend thousands of bucks to have Saddam Hussein's fingertips hanging on their wall. Number 7. Marilyn Manson figurine.
Nobody was off limits. I mean, they brought like Colonel Sanders against like the founder of Wendy's. It was a really fun show.
If there's one thing in this world creepier than Marilyn Manson, it's a claymation figure of Marilyn Manson. The only thing that makes this item a little less spooky is the fact it wasn't custom made by an obsessed fan of the controversial goth singer. It was actually used in the filming of Celebrity Deathmatch, a stop-motion animated series on MTV. This show featured highly stylized professional wrestling matches between claymation dolls of various celebrities. Manson was one of the most prominent figures on the show, show, and he was even asked by MTV to compose a song for the soundtrack, which was eventually nominated for a Grammy Award. The guy who brought the doll into the store bought it from someone involved in the production of Celebrity Deathmatch and wanted $8,000 in return for it. Chumlee and Big Hoss weren't sure its worth was that much, so they invited toy expert Johnny Jimenez to take a look. He estimated its value at $1,500, but Big Hoss wasn't too ready to offer any more than $500. The seller eventually walked away, hoping its value will go back up in the years to come. Number 6. Musical Jolly Chimp. Jolly Chimps were pretty popular a few decades ago, but kids these days think they're totally creepy. That's the main reason why one lady wanted to get rid of the one that she owned. Her grandkids were scared every time they looked at the doll's off-putting gums, sinister grimace, and bulging, red-shot eyes. The disturbing doll wasn't enough to scare the old man, who's a big fan of all vintage toys. He appreciated the rich history behind this Jolly Chimp that was made in the 50s and was even featured in Pixar's Toy Story 3. As a matter of fact, the old man liked it so much that he did something pawn store owners almost never do. The lady hoped that she would get $100 max, but the experienced appraiser didn't want to take advantage of her and offered $150 instead. A wave of nostalgia probably swept over him after seeing a toy from his childhood and reminded him of the better days. Number 5. Dinosaur eggs.
So how much do these things go for? Because I have no idea what dinosaur eggs are even worth.
The value of these eggs is nowhere near what they were in the early years.
Dinosaur eggs aren't a kind of thing people usually bring to a pawn store, so it doesn't come as a surprise Corey Harrison had a hard time putting a value on them. He was pretty much lost for words after a lady strolled into the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop asking for $20,000, and he had to call someone more knowledgeable to check if her claim was legit. He didn't want to spend a fortune on a bunch of ordinary rocks, but the expert Tom Lindgren confirms the eggs actually belonged to a dinosaur. Unfortunately, they weren't worth anywhere near $20,000. The expert said that there's a bunch of eggs like these ones on the international market already, and getting a good price isn't so easy anymore. Corey eventually agreed to pay $500 for both eggs and couldn't wait to show them to Chumlee and mess around by telling them that they're going to hatch. Number 4. Electrotherapy Kit.
Body runs on electricity, so therefore if it had more electricity, it would work better. Sounds logical, sort of in a twisted, weird, quacky kind of way.
A number of people trying to sell their shock therapy devices at the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop is pretty disturbing. But some of them are actually funny looking. Master Violet Ray number 11 is a case in that point. Devices such as this one were used in electrotherapy, a popular pseudoscience at the turn of the 20th century. Back in the day, people sought to cure dozens of diseases through light exposure, until they were banned in the US. Master Violet Ray number 11 was believed to cure everything from hair loss and acne to rheumatism and cataracts. The Pawn Stars were impressed after seeing the device actually worked, and Chumlee even joked that he's going to use it to cure Rick's baldness. MARILYN was hoping to get $100 for it after selling it, but eventually walked away with $75. Rick had a feeling that he won't have a hard time finding a buyer, but even if that didn't happen, he could always use it to keep Chumlee in check. Number 3. Antique Blood Transfusion Kit.
I mean, I don't know too much about anything, but just from the screws and the bolts, I wouldn't be surprised if it was from the 50s or 60s.
If someone comes in to your pawn shop with a vintage transfusion kit from the 50s saying it's used by a lazy vampire, you'd probably be a little freaked out. Fortunately, Chumlee is one of those people who has a taste for the weird and bizarre, and this item was right up his alley. This spooky medical device consisted of a sprawling array of jars and tubes, and the woman who wanted to sell it knew exactly how it's supposed to work. Chumlee believes that they would be able to find a buyer for this item amongst passionate collectors, but had a hard time putting a price on it. He could say that the item wasn't as old as the lady was claiming, and asked her how much money she wanted. Artie went went with an oddly specific price of $211, but they eventually settled with $125 after she scared Chumlee off with an intimidating look in her eyes. Number 2. Can of elephant waste.
I know there's a sucker point every minute, but if this guy is trying to sell canned manure, he's barking up the wrong tree.
The owner of a can of elephant manure from the Washington Zoo was probably one of the biggest trolls in Pawn Stars history. He was super confident after walking into the store and told Chumlee he brought in a phenomenal opportunity. In a mini interview outside the store, the seller stated he'll be happy to get $5 for the item, but asked for $10,000 instead. The old man wasn't having it and told the man he's barking up the wrong tree. But his less experienced co-worker took the bait. Chum thought that he would have some fun with a can of elephant waste and offered $20 out of his own pocket to become its new owner. He seemed pretty proud to make this purchase, but it eventually turned out elephant waste was worth less money than he cashed out. The seller admitted he originally paid $7.50 for the can and described it as a good investment. Number 1. Shrunken human head.
Well, I hope it is real, because then it'll be worth more money.
If it's real, some poor guy lost his head over it. I don't want it in the shop.
Okay.
Despite being in the business for decades, Rick Harrison never had a shrunken head brought into his store before. The practice of head shrinking was a part of special rituals documented in the northwestern region of the Amazon rainforest. Rick was very familiar with the history behind them and all the steps that go into shrinking a human head. One of the most crucial parts was slicing into the back of the head, removing the skull, and putting the skin back together. Despite the fact he was excited about having his first shrunken head at the store, Rick didn't buy it. He realized the item was fake because the back of the head was stitched up with a cotton thread that was never used by the Amazon warriors. Even if Rick wanted to make the purchase, his dad wouldn't be on board with that. The old man said that he didn't want it in the shop even if it was real because some poor guy lost his head over it. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.